Hey everyone, I hope you're excited for this video because today I'm going to tell you how you can balance your hormones just by changing up a few things in your daily routine, your daily lifestyle. I'm also going to talk about how your extreme PMS symptoms could be tied to an imbalance in your ovarian hormones, estrogen and progesterone. And specifically, we're going to talk about how to overcome estrogen dominance. Before I get into this video, if you enjoy this video and you enjoy my content, make sure to like the video, subscribe to my channel so you get alerts when I update new hormone content. Without further ado, let's get right into it. So let's start off with what is estrogen, because the topic of today is estrogen dominance and how we can go about improving that. Estrogen is this ovarian hormone. It's important for bone growth. It's important for blood clotting. It's important for our reproductive health, our menstrual cycle. The level of estrogen that we have as women in our bodies is heavily regulated through intricate biochemical pathways. Then we also have something known as xenoestrogens. These are basically synthetic estrogens. They are a type of hormone disruptor that have estrogen-like effects in the body. We don't naturally make them. We accumulate them through things like everyday products we use, foods that we consume, medications that we take, such as the birth control pill. These xenoestrogens, these fake estrogens, come into the body through that kind of exposure. And because they look similar to our own estrogen, they actually are able to bind to estrogen receptors and mimic the effect that real estrogen has, right? So this really alters our body's natural function. And this is particularly detrimental to those hormone sensitive organs like the uterus, the breast tissue, our immune system, our neurological system, as well as just basic human development. So we want to talk about how xenoestrogens will contribute to estrogen dominance, and then what are a few things we can do to really help us avoid estrogen dominance in the future and improve it if it's something we're going through right now. How do they contribute to estrogen dominance? So exposure to xenoestrogens can increase that total level of estrogen we have floating around in our blood, right? And this simply leads us to have just too much estrogen in our blood, especially in comparison to progesterone. Right? Estrogen and progesterone, they do this really nice dance together throughout the month of our menstrual cycle. We don't really want them to be too far away from each other. This is kind of how that balancing act I picture looking. Buildup of xenoestrogens has been indicated in a variety of conditions. We see a lot of breast conditions, prostate, testicular cancer, obesity, infertility, endometriosis, fibroids, the list goes on. Some really kind of common symptoms that I see of estrogen dominance in the patients that I work with are things like heavy PMS, so a lot of cramping around the period, a lot of breast tenderness around the period, headaches around the period, trouble sleeping. Some people even have very heavy menstrual periods, right? A lot of mood swings before the period comes on, especially if you're having mood swings for about like a week or so, even longer. These are some of the things that I see. There are a variety of other symptoms, but these are kind of the main ones that I'm seeing every day in my clinical practice. And so what I want to just go through right now are a few tips to, again, avoiding that estrogen dominant state. I have a few of them here that I've compiled. The first tip that I can give you to avoid estrogen dominance, this hormonal imbalance that will cause symptoms, are avoiding things that are called, or chemical compounds that are called organochlorines. Now, these are one of the largest sources. These are compounds found in pesticides, dry cleaning products, and the manufacturing of plastics as well. They're also used in the bleaching of feminine hygiene products. So actually, tip number one is really to swap your feminine hygiene products for organic cotton feminine hygiene products if possible. They can be more pricey, but they are worth it at the end of the day so that you are not accumulating this toxic compound in your body. The second tip is to avoid items that have BPA, otherwise known as bisphenol A. This is a breakdown of polycarbonate, and it's used in plastic bottle production. It's found in the lining of many canned foods and juice containers. Tip number two, therefore, is to really try and opt for glass or ceramic or stainless steel to store your foods, to consume your foods and liquids. And of course, keeping canned foods to a minimum if possible, okay, and canned drinks as well. Tip number 3 is to avoid heated plastics and plastic lined items as well, and even styrofoam. Okay, so heating can happen through, the microwave. It can happen through, of course, the oven, but even heating from the sun. So if you leave things in the car that are in plastic, you probably want to avoid them if they were heated. Okay, because that polycarbonate can escape once they're heated. So the next tip that I want to give you guys is really to try and choose organic produce, especially with the thin-skinned fruits and vegetables. These are the ones that I'm most concerned about. It's not always possible to go entirely organic. So if you can just focus on those that have a thinner skin, I'm less concerned about things like bananas or avocados, things like that. The next tip is to try and opt for hormone-free animal products when possible. So, this includes eggs, poultry, meats, dairy even, right? And this is helpful to avoid those, estrogen injections, to avoid different supplements or medicines that are given to these animals, and even growth hormone. The next tip that I have for you is to simply start reading the labels of the food items that you are consuming. If the label has this ingredient list that just goes on forever, that's a red flag. If the ingredient list contains ingredients that you can't really pronounce, that's a red flag as well. Common food preservatives and color additives are really helpful to avoid. And they have a wide variety of names. FD&C red number 3, that's a really big one. If you see any kind of color there, these are dyes, okay? These are things we want to avoid. Yellow is another one that I see often, blue. Butylated hydroxyanisole is another one that we really want to avoid, otherwise known as BHA. This is a food preservative. Getting familiar with what are the ingredients in the products that I'm consuming. Are these things that I recognize? Are these things that I can even pronounce? If they're not, you probably want to find an alternative. The next tip that I want to share with you guys is to try to swap your hair care and body care products for safer, less toxic products. You can definitely refer to the Environmental Working Group. They have a great website where you can look up the products that you're currently using to see the toxicity levels and then find alternatives. You can also download the app. I love it. It's called Think Dirty. This really helps you understand what is in the products that I'm using and what are better alternatives, what are safer alternatives, because whatever you're putting on your skin, on your scalp, is inevitably going to end up in your bloodstream, and it is going to have an impact on your hormones, and we see this all the time in clinical practice. So that's the second last tip. Now the last tip, and this is one of the most important tips I would say, is to make sure that you are having regular bowel movements. And I cannot tell you how many of my patients are not having regular bowel movements, or believe that going every other day is very regular and it's normal for them and it's something they've been doing since high school or before. But I can assure you that you will feel a lot better if you are having regular bowel movements. This is a one-way road to hormonal balance, and there are a wide variety of ways to do this, and definitely work with your either naturopathic doctor or your medical doctor, whoever it is, to make sure that you are having those regular bowel movements. What happens if you're not having it is that those hormones that we use up, like estrogen or like cortisol, we use them up, we detox them through the liver, and then they're ready to poop out. But if you're not having those regular bowel movements, those used up hormones are sitting in your intestinal lumen and they're able to easily get reabsorbed back into the bloodstream, furthering a condition like estrogen dominance. Okay? So having regular bowel movements is something that is key. At the end of the day, I can give you all of these tips, but it's really important to test your hormone levels. Testing and not guessing is what's going to get you on that one road direction to improvement, right? Because yes, you could be suffering with estrogen dominance. There might be too much estrogen in the blood, but how do we know that, maybe your estrogen's fine, but your progesterone is actually suffering and it's not very good? And we know that what can happen is either you have, let's say this is progesterone and this is estrogen. Either there is this estrogen dominance piece, right, where you're exposing yourself to plastics and toxins in your body care products and the birth control pill, all of that. Estrogen goes up, right? Maybe progesterone's normal. But what can also happen is estrogen's totally normal, but, maybe you're suffering with PCOS, or maybe you're just not ovulating very well, and your progesterone is lower than we'd like it to be. And so what that looks like to your body is as though you're in a state of estrogen dominance, but really progesterone is much lower than we'd like. So I find it very important to test these hormones in my patients. And of course, you want to work with your medical professional to determine the exact day of testing. I personally like to test these hormones either on day 3 of the cycle or day 21, depending on which hormones we're talking about. So all that to say, I hope you found this video helpful. I hope that if you are dealing with symptoms of estrogen dominance, then you reach out to a medical professional in your area to work on that. If you want to work with me, you can definitely do so if you live within Ontario. All of my contact information will be held below. And if you want to hear more about estrogen dominance, or if you have any specific topics you want me to make a video on, please feel free to drop a comment down below. That pretty much ends this video, and I will see you guys in the next one.